My name is Evelyn Parker, and I was 13 years old the night my parents decided I was no longer their daughter. For years, I believed I must have done something terrible to deserve it. Children have a way of blaming themselves when adults fail them. If your mother looks at you with disappointment often enough, you eventually start searching your own reflection for the reason. I grew up in a small house outside Portland, Oregon, with my parents, Thomas and Linda Parker, and my older sister Rachel. Rachel was 16 months older than me, but in my mother's eyes, she might as well have been born from sunlight. She had golden hair, bright blue eyes, and a natural ability to make adults adore her. Teachers called her charming. Neighbors called her delightful. My mother called her special. I was the quiet one. The practical one. The one who fixed things, remembered things, and adapted when nobody considered me. If Rachel needed new shoes, we found the money. If I needed school supplies, I was told to check last year's backpack. If Rachel wanted dance lessons, my mother rearranged the budget. If I wanted a science kit from the educational store downtown, my father said, maybe next time. Next time almost never came. The difference between us appeared in small ways at first. Rachel's birthday parties had balloons, themed decorations, and cakes from real bakeries. Mine usually involved a grocery store cupcake and whatever dinner my mother already planned to cook. Rachel's school photos were framed in the hallway. Mine stayed in the envelope, bent at the corners inside a kitchen drawer. Rachel's achievements became family announcements. Mine became brief acknowledgments followed by reminders not to make my sister feel bad. When I was 12, I found out Rachel had a college savings account. I discovered it by accident while helping my mother sort old paperwork. The statement showed regular deposits going back years. Thousands of dollars carefully saved for her future. At first, I felt excited. Maybe I had one too. Maybe this was something parents did for both children. So I asked, "Mom, where's my college account?" Linda looked up from the papers with genuine confusion, as if the question itself made no sense. "You don't have one." I blinked. "Why not?" She sighed, impatient already. "Rachel needs stability. You always figure things out." That sentence stayed with me for years. You always figure things out. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Later, I understood it was permission to neglect me. The summer everything changed began with a scholarship application. My science teacher told me about a residential STEM academy at Oregon State University. 6 weeks of advanced math, engineering projects, laboratory work, and mentorship. The program accepted only a small number of students statewide, and full scholarships covered tuition, housing, meals, and materials. I didn't tell my parents I applied. Hope felt dangerous in our house. Hope invited laughter. Hope invited comparison. So I filled out the application at the public library after school, using the computer near the back window where nobody bothered me. I wrote essays about renewable energy, robotics, and why I believed technology could solve problems for ordinary families. Then I submitted everything and waited. On a warm afternoon in May, the acceptance letter arrived. I remember opening it beside the mailbox because I couldn't wait until I got inside. "Congratulations, Evelyn Parker. Out of more than 1,500 applicants, you have been selected." For one perfect minute, I stood on the sidewalk feeling weightless. Someone had seen me. Someone who didn't know Rachel. Someone who didn't care about charm or photographs or who smiled better at church potlucks. They had read my work and decided I was enough. I ran inside holding the letter like treasure. Rachel sat at the kitchen table painting her nails while my mother folded laundry. My father was in the living room watching the evening news. I told them everything. The program. The scholarship. The acceptance. My voice shook with excitement. My mother took the letter, read it, and frowned. 6 weeks away from home? Yes. In Corvallis? Yes. For science? I nodded. She glanced toward Rachel. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second came that same evening at dinner. Rachel announced she wanted to attend an expensive performing arts workshop in Los Angeles. No scholarship. No discount. Nearly $4,000. My mother immediately looked thoughtful. My father rubbed his forehead. Then Linda turned toward me. Evelyn, we'll need you to decline the science program. I thought I had misheard. What? We can't manage both opportunities. But mine is paid for. That's not the point. Her voice sharpened. Rachel's workshop could help her future. I stared at her. And mine can't? The room went silent. Rachel looked down at her plate. My father said nothing. Linda's face hardened. Don't be selfish. Something inside me moved. Small, but important. For the first time, I didn't apologize. No, I said quietly. My mother's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? My hands trembled beneath the table, but I kept going. I earned this. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not giving it up. The silence that followed felt enormous. My mother placed her fork down slowly. If you cannot sacrifice for this family, she said, each word cold and deliberate, then maybe you don't belong in this family. At 13, I thought she was just angry. I thought parents said terrible things sometimes and regretted them later. I didn't know she meant every word. I didn't know that within days, my belongings would be packed into black garbage bags on the front porch. I didn't know my Uncle Benjamin would drive through the night to get me. And I definitely didn't know that 15 years later, the same parents who abandoned me would stand in a lawyer's office begging for a share of the life I built without them. For 3 days after the dinner conversation, nobody mentioned the scholarship again. At 13 years old, I interpreted the silence as victory. Not because my parents suddenly supported me. Because I thought they had simply decided the argument wasn't worth continuing. Children are surprisingly optimistic when it comes to their parents. Even after years of disappointment, part of me still believed there was a line they would never cross. A point where being my mother and father would matter more than whatever problem they thought I caused. I spent those 3 days imagining the STEM Academy. I researched the campus online at the public library. I read biographies of former participants. I printed maps of the engineering labs and folded them carefully into my notebook. Every time I looked at those pages, I felt something rare. Excitement about the future. Not survival. Not adaptation. The future. On the 4th afternoon, I came home from school and immediately knew something was wrong. My backpack felt heavier with every step toward the house. The driveway was empty. No cars. No sounds. No television playing inside. Just silence. Then I saw the garbage bags. 4 black garbage bags sitting on the front porch. Beside them was a cardboard box. At first, I thought someone had cleaned out the garage. Then I noticed the sticker on the side of the box. My name was written across it in black marker. Evelyn. My stomach dropped. I climbed the porch steps slowly. Inside the first garbage bag were my clothes. Inside the second were books. The third contained school supplies, photographs, and a small stuffed bear my grandmother gave me when I was 6. The fourth contained everything else. Every possession I owned. For several seconds, I simply stood there staring. My mind refused to understand what my eyes already knew. Then I saw the envelope taped to the front door. My hand shook as I opened it. The note was written in my mother's handwriting. Since you have chosen your own path, you can live with the consequences of your choices. Rachel's future comes first. Perhaps this experience will teach you gratitude. Mom. That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. No I love you. Just consequences. I remember reading the note 3 times because it felt impossible. Parents did not do this. Parents got angry. Parents grounded children. Parents yelled. They did not leave 13-year-old girls on front porches with garbage bags. Yet there I was. Standing alone. The afternoon sunlight suddenly felt cold. I don't remember how long I sat on those steps. An hour maybe. 2. Long enough for shadows to stretch across the yard. Long enough for neighbors to glance over and quickly look away. Long enough for panic to become something quieter. Numbness. Around 6 o'clock, an old pickup truck pulled into the driveway. I recognized it immediately. My Uncle Benjamin climbed out before the engine even stopped. The moment he saw the bags, his expression changed. Not surprise. Not confusion. Pain. Deep, immediate pain. Evelyn. I stood up quickly. Uncle Ben. Then I started crying. Not dramatic crying. Just complete collapse. The kind that happens when you've spent hours holding yourself together and suddenly see someone safe. He crossed the yard in seconds and wrapped his arms around me. I'm here. That was the first thing he said. Not questions. Not explanations. Just I'm here. Later, I would learn my grandmother called him immediately after discovering what happened. He drove nearly 5 hours from Seattle without stopping. Where are Mom and Dad? I asked. Uncle Benjamin looked toward the house. Gone. Gone where? He hesitated. I don't know. We loaded my belongings into the truck as darkness settled over the neighborhood. Nobody came outside. Nobody stopped us. Nobody explained anything. The house where I spent 13 years looked exactly the same. Yet somehow it already felt like someone else's home. Before we left, I looked back one final time. Part of me expected the front door to open. My mother running outside. My father apologizing. Rachel saying it was all a misunderstanding. Nothing happened. The porch light switched on automatically as the timer activated. That was all. We drove through the night. Oregon disappeared behind us mile after mile. Uncle Benjamin never pushed me to talk. Every few hours he simply asked if I was hungry or needed a break. Around midnight, we stopped at a diner outside Eugene. I sat across from him in a booth while pretending to eat pancakes. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me all evening. Did I do something wrong? Uncle Benjamin put down his coffee cup. No. Then why would they do this? He looked at me for a long moment. Because sometimes adults make selfish choices and convince themselves they're justified. I stared at the table. They picked Rachel. His voice softened. Yes. Hearing someone say it out loud hurt more than discovering it. Because once spoken, the truth became real. The drive continued through the night. Around dawn, the Seattle skyline appeared in the distance. Gray clouds hung over the city. Rain dotted the windshield. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something besides grief. Relief. Small. Fragile. But real. Uncle Benjamin lived in a modest 2-story house near Green Lake. Nothing fancy. Nothing impressive. Yet when we pulled into the driveway, a porch light glowed warmly through the morning rain. Welcome home, he said. Home. The word nearly broke me. Inside, a bedroom had already been prepared. Fresh sheets. School supplies on the desk. Books on the shelves. Someone had planned for me. Someone expected me. Someone wanted me there. Exhaustion finally overtook everything else. Before falling asleep, I heard Uncle Benjamin speaking quietly on the phone in the hallway. At the time, I couldn't understand the conversation. Years later, I would learn exactly what happened that morning. Because while I slept in my new room, my uncle sat across from a lawyer and signed a set of documents that would eventually destroy every claim my parents believed they still had over my life. The first week in Seattle felt like living on another planet. Everything was different. The weather. The city. The sounds outside my bedroom window. Even the way people spoke seemed softer somehow. Yet the strangest difference wasn't the environment. It was the absence of fear. Back in Oregon, every day involved measuring moods, watching expressions, predicting disappointments before they arrived. In Uncle Benjamin's house, I didn't have to do that. Nobody was keeping score. Nobody compared me to Rachel. Nobody treated my existence like an inconvenience. The first morning after I arrived, I woke up before sunrise out of habit. For years, I learned to stay out of everyone's way. Quiet children become experts at disappearing. I carefully made my bed, folded my clothes, and walked downstairs expecting to find a list of rules. Instead, I found Uncle Benjamin making pancakes while listening to jazz music. He looked up and smiled. "Morning." I hesitated. "Morning. Blueberry or chocolate chip?" For a second, I genuinely didn't understand the question. Nobody had ever asked which kind I preferred. "Blueberry?" He nodded as though that answer mattered enormously. "Excellent choice." It sounds ridiculous now, but I nearly cried over pancakes. Not because of the food. Because preference implies value. Asking what someone wants means you care about the answer. During those first weeks, Uncle Benjamin never pressured me to discuss what happened. Instead, he focused on normal things. School enrollment. New clothes. Finding the nearest library. Building routines. Every evening, we ate dinner together at the kitchen table. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Either way felt safe. One evening about a month after I moved in, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. "Why did you come get me?" Uncle Benjamin looked surprised. "Because you needed someone. You drove all night." He shrugged. "Of course I did. But why?" For several seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he set down his fork. "Evelyn." His voice softened. "The better question is why wouldn't I?" I had no answer. Because deep down, I still believed love had conditions attached. Performance. Sacrifice. Usefulness. Value. Uncle Benjamin seemed to operate under an entirely different system. Fall arrived. Then winter. I started 8th grade at a new school and immediately discovered something shocking. I was good at things. Really good. Without constant criticism clouding everything, my grades improved even further. Teachers encouraged me. Classmates liked me. For the first time, I wasn't known as Rachel's younger sister. I was simply Evelyn. It felt amazing. Around Christmas, a card arrived from Oregon. My pulse accelerated the moment I saw the handwriting. Linda Parker. My mother. For nearly 6 months, there had been nothing. No phone calls. No letters. No apologies. Nothing. Hands shaking, I opened the envelope. Inside was a Christmas card with a printed family photo. My parents stood beside Rachel in matching sweaters, smiling perfectly for the camera. There was no handwritten note. No message. No mention of me. Just signatures. Love, Mom, Dad, and Rachel. I stared at the card for several minutes before placing it back inside the envelope. Somehow, the silence hurt less than that photograph. Because it confirmed what I had been trying not to believe. They weren't looking for me. They weren't missing me. They had simply continued without me. When Uncle Benjamin found the card later that evening, he didn't say anything immediately. He just sat beside me on the couch. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not really." He nodded. "Okay." A few moments passed. Then he said something that changed my life. "People can fail you without defining you." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means your parents made choices." His eyes remained steady. "Those choices belong to them. They don't determine your worth." At 13, I only partially understood. At 28, I understood perfectly. The years passed surprisingly quickly. High school arrived. Then more opportunities. Science fairs. Debate competitions. Academic awards. Every achievement felt different than before because I no longer spent energy wondering whether someone would care. Uncle Benjamin always cared. Every single time. When I won a regional engineering competition, he took a day off work to attend. When I became valedictorian, he sat in the front row and cried harder than anyone in the auditorium. When I received acceptance letters from universities across the country, he framed the first one and hung it in the hallway. Not because he wanted credit. Because he was proud. During my senior year, I finally asked about something that happened shortly after I moved in. Do you remember that phone call the first morning? Uncle Benjamin nearly dropped his coffee cup. What phone call? The one with the lawyer. For a moment, an expression crossed his face that I couldn't identify. Surprise mixed with concern. Then he smiled. You heard that? A little. He sat quietly for several seconds. Some things needed to be handled. Like what? Paperwork. That answer felt incomplete. Very incomplete. But he refused to elaborate. I didn't push further. At least not then. Years later, I would learn exactly what paperwork he meant. And when I did, I would finally understand why my parents would eventually lose everything they believed they were entitled to. Because while I was busy rebuilding my life, Uncle Benjamin had quietly been protecting my future. In ways none of us fully appreciated yet. Including me. By the time I graduated college with honors and accepted my first accounting position in Seattle, I hadn't spoken to my parents in nearly 8 years. And honestly, I believed that chapter of my life was over. I was wrong. Because just a few months after earning my CPA license, my phone would ring for the first time in nearly a decade. And the person calling wouldn't be reaching out to apologize. She would be calling because she needed money. 8 years is a strange amount of time. Long enough for a child to become an adult. Long enough for old wounds to scar over. Long enough to convince yourself certain chapters are permanently closed. By the time I turned 21, my life looked nothing like the one my parents imagined when they threw me out. I was attending the University of Washington on academic scholarships. I had graduated near the top of my class. I worked part-time during the school year and full-time during the summers. Most importantly, I had stopped waiting for someone to rescue me. Uncle Benjamin often said independence wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about knowing you could survive if you had to. That lesson stayed with me. College wasn't easy. There were nights I studied until sunrise. Weeks when every dollar mattered. Moments when exhaustion felt overwhelming. But every challenge carried something my childhood never had. Purpose. Nobody was forcing me to prove my worth. I was building a future because I wanted one. During my junior year, I switched my focus toward accounting and finance. Numbers made sense to me the same way science once had. They followed rules. They rewarded discipline. They couldn't be manipulated by favoritism. When I told Uncle Benjamin I wanted to pursue a CPA license after graduation, he smiled. You'll be excellent. How do you know? I asked. He laughed. Because you notice details other people miss. That confidence meant more than he probably realized. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level accounting position at one of Seattle's largest commercial real estate firms. The work was demanding. Long hours. Tight deadlines. Endless spreadsheets. I loved every minute of it. Within 2 years, I earned my CPA license. Within 4 years, I was managing major financial reporting projects. Meanwhile, Uncle Benjamin's business empire continued growing. Most people assumed he inherited his success. The truth was far less glamorous. He built it himself. Property by property. Investment by investment. Decade by decade. Nothing flashy. Just relentless consistency. One evening after work, we sat together on his back porch overlooking Green Lake. The sun was setting behind the trees while ducks drifted across the water. "You know," he said, "most people misunderstand success." "How?" I asked. "They think success changes who you are." He shook his head. "It doesn't." "Then what does it do?" "It reveals who you already were." At the time, I thought he was talking about business. Years later, I realized he was talking about family. Around my 22nd birthday, my phone rang while I was reviewing quarterly reports at the office. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. Normally, I would have ignored it. For some reason, I answered. "Hello?" Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard in nearly 9 years. "Evelyn?" My entire body froze. Linda Parker. My mother. For several seconds, I genuinely forgot how to speak. "Mom?" The word felt foreign. Uncomfortable. Like trying on clothes that no longer fit. "Oh, thank goodness." Her voice immediately sounded emotional. Relieved. Familiar. Almost loving. The performance was impressive. "I've been trying to find your number." That was a lie. Anyone could have contacted Grandma Eleanor. Anyone could have found Uncle Benjamin. They simply hadn't bothered. "What do you want?" The question slipped out before I could soften it. Silence followed. Then she laughed awkwardly. "Straight to business, huh?" I waited. Finally, she explained. Rachel was struggling financially. Apparently the performing arts career my parents sacrificed everything for hadn't worked out exactly as planned. There had been debt. Failed opportunities. Expensive mistakes. My mother spent nearly 10 minutes describing the situation. One detail stood out. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she ask about school. Work. Life. Anything. The conversation revolved entirely around Rachel. Eventually, she reached the point. "We were hoping you might help." There it was. 9 years of silence reduced to a financial request. I leaned back in my office chair and stared out the window. Downtown Seattle stretched beneath gray skies. Somewhere below, people hurried through their day completely unaware that my past had just called asking for money. "How much?" I asked. My mother hesitated. 20,000. I almost laughed. Not because of the amount. Because of the audacity. They abandoned a 13-year-old girl. Ignored her existence for nearly a decade. Then returned with an invoice. No. Silence. Complete silence. "Excuse me?" "No." My voice remained calm. "I'm not giving Rachel $20,000. Her tone changed instantly. Warmth disappeared. Frustration emerged. "She's your sister. Wasn't that your argument when you asked me to sacrifice my scholarship?" Another silence. This one much longer. "Evelyn. You haven't spoken to me in 9 years." My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't cracking. For the first time in my life, I felt completely steady. You don't get to disappear and then reappear when you need something. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just coldly. Transaction denied. Request rejected. Yet after hanging up, I sat motionless for several minutes. Not because I felt guilty. Because I felt sad. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of me had hoped the call might be different. An apology. Regret. Accountability. Instead, it confirmed exactly what Uncle Benjamin had quietly suspected for years. They didn't miss their daughter. They missed access to her. When I told Uncle Benjamin what happened that evening, he listened carefully before nodding. "I'm proud of you." "For saying no?" He smiled. For recognizing the difference between compassion and obligation. I thought about that for a long time. Because for years I confused the two. Saying no felt selfish. Yet somehow, protecting myself felt healthier than sacrificing myself ever had. The calls continued occasionally after that. Birthdays. Holidays. Emergencies. Every conversation eventually involved money. Every request carried the same assumption. That I still owed them something. What none of us knew then was that life was quietly moving toward a much larger confrontation. One that wouldn't involve $20,000. One that would involve an estate worth tens of millions. And a set of legal documents my uncle signed the morning after he rescued me from that porch. By the time I turned 28, my life had become something I once believed was impossible. Stable. Peaceful. Predictable. I lived in a comfortable townhouse overlooking Green Lake. I had a career I genuinely loved. I had close friends. Financial security. Professional respect. Most importantly, I had a family. Not the family I was born into. The family I chose. And at the center of that family was Uncle Benjamin. Although by then, calling him my uncle felt strangely inaccurate. He had attended every graduation. Every award ceremony. Every major milestone. He taught me how to drive. Helped me negotiate my first salary. Sat beside me when I experienced my first real heartbreak. Everything a father is supposed to do. He did. One rainy Sunday afternoon, we were having lunch together when he suddenly became quiet. That alone was unusual. Uncle Benjamin was normally the kind of person who could turn grocery shopping into an entertaining story. "You okay?" I asked. He smiled. "Just tired." I didn't believe him. Neither did his doctor. 2 weeks later, tests revealed the truth. Pancreatic cancer. Advanced. Aggressive. The kind of diagnosis that changes every conversation that follows. I still remember sitting in the parking lot after the appointment. Rain striking the windshield. Hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. "We're going to fight this," I said. Uncle Benjamin looked out the passenger window. "Of course we are." But his voice carried a sadness that terrified me. The following year became a blur of treatments, appointments, consultations, and hope. Endless hope. Some days were good. Some were devastating. Yet through all of it, Uncle Benjamin remained remarkably himself. Calm. Practical. Kind. He worried more about everyone else than he did himself. One evening, after a particularly difficult treatment session, he asked me to visit his attorney. "Why?" I asked. He smiled gently. "Because responsible people prepare." I hated the conversation immediately. "You're not dying." The words came out sharper than intended. "Evelyn. Don't." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Listen to me." Reluctantly, I did. "No matter what happens, you'll be okay." Tears immediately filled my eyes. "I don't want okay." His expression softened. "I know." Several weeks later, he met privately with attorney Catherine Whitmore. Then again. Then several more times over the next few months. Every time I asked about the meetings, he gave the same answer. "Just paperwork." The phrase had become familiar by then. Apparently important things happened through paperwork. As the months passed, his health declined steadily. Yet even during the hardest moments, he remained focused on protecting other people. One afternoon, while reviewing financial reports together, he looked at me and smiled. "You know you're running this company someday." I laughed. "No pressure." "You'll do better than I did." "Impossible." "See," he replied. "That's exactly why you'll do better." Looking back now, I realize he was preparing me. Not just professionally. Emotionally. teaching me how to continue without him. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was in a board meeting reviewing quarterly performance projections when my phone vibrated. The hospital. Somehow, before answering, I already knew. 30 minutes later, I was sitting beside his bed. The machines were quiet. The room felt impossibly small. Uncle Benjamin looked tired. More tired than I had ever seen him. Yet when he noticed me, he smiled. "Hey kid." I immediately started crying. "You promised." He chuckled weakly. "I promised you'd be okay." Then he motioned for me to come closer. "Listen carefully." I leaned in. His voice had become little more than a whisper. "You were never abandoned because something was wrong with you." Fresh tears streamed down my face. "I know." "No." He shook his head slightly. "You understand it. But I need you to believe it." I couldn't speak. "Everything good in your life came from who you are." His eyes remained fixed on mine. "Not despite who you are." Those were some of the last meaningful words he ever spoke to me. He passed away early the next morning. The grief was overwhelming. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just enormous. Like losing the foundation beneath your feet. Thousands of people attended the funeral. Business leaders. Employees. Friends. Community members. People whose lives he quietly improved over decades. Listening to their stories, I realized something extraordinary. Every person described the same man. Generous. Honest. Reliable. The exact person I knew. After the funeral, I assumed the hardest part was over. I was wrong. 3 days later, attorney Catherine Whitmore called. "We need to schedule the reading of the will." Her tone sounded unusually serious. "Okay." A pause followed. Then she added something unexpected. "You should prepare yourself." My stomach tightened. "For what?" Another pause. "Your parents have hired legal representation." For several seconds, I couldn't process the sentence. My parents? Yes. I hadn't spoken to Thomas or Linda Parker in nearly 15 years. Not meaningfully. Not truly. Yet somehow they had learned about Uncle Benjamin's death. And apparently, they believed it concerned them. What do they want? Catherine exhaled slowly. The estate. The word hung in the air. Estate. Uncle Benjamin's business holdings. Real estate portfolio. Investments. Assets accumulated across 4 decades. Tens of millions of dollars. On what basis? I asked. Catherine's answer chilled me. They're claiming family rights. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. Family rights. The people who left a 13-year-old girl on a porch with garbage bags were suddenly interested in family. Yet Catherine didn't sound amused. She sounded concerned. There's more. What? Her voice lowered slightly. They seem extremely confident. After the call ended, I sat alone in my office staring at the city skyline. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Because confidence usually comes from information. And somehow, my parents believed they knew something I didn't. What they didn't realize was that Uncle Benjamin spent 15 years preparing for exactly this possibility. And in a few days, when the will was finally read, a piece of paperwork signed long ago would begin destroying every argument they thought they had. The reading of Uncle Benjamin's will was scheduled for the following Thursday morning. In theory, it should have been a straightforward legal formality. In reality, it felt like the opening scene of a war. The moment I walked into Catherine Whitmore's office, I understood exactly how serious the situation had become. My parents were already there. So was Rachel. It was the first time I had seen any of them in person in almost 15 years. The experience was stranger than I expected. For years, I imagined this moment. Sometimes I pictured anger. Sometimes satisfaction. Sometimes heartbreak. Instead, I mostly felt detached. Like I was looking at people I used to know. Thomas Parker looked older. His hair had gone mostly gray. Deep lines surrounded his eyes. Linda Parker appeared thinner than I remembered. More fragile somehow. Rachel looked exhausted. Life clearly hadn't unfolded the way my parents once imagined for their golden child. Yet none of that surprised me as much as the man sitting beside them. Expensive suit. Polished smile. Thick legal folder. Their attorney. And judging by his expression, he believed he was about to win. Ms. Parker. He stood and extended a hand. Daniel Mercer. I shook it politely. Evelyn. I've heard a great deal about you. The comment felt loaded. I simply nodded and sat down. Catherine Whitmore entered moments later carrying several folders. Unlike Mercer, she didn't smile. She looked focused. Professional. Prepared. That alone made me feel slightly better. Thank you all for coming, she began. The conference room fell silent. Rain tapped softly against the windows overlooking downtown Seattle. The atmosphere felt heavy. Almost theatrical. As executor of Benjamin Parker's estate, I am required to review the contents of his final will and associated legal documents. My father's attorney immediately leaned forward. Before we begin, we'd like to formally note our client's position regarding familial inheritance rights. Catherine didn't even look at him. Noted. Something about her confidence caught my attention. She wasn't worried. Not even slightly. Mercer continued anyway. My clients are the closest living blood relatives. Catherine calmly turned a page. That assumption will become relevant later. The attorney frowned. My father exchanged a glance with my mother. For the first time, I noticed uncertainty creeping into their expressions. Catherine opened the primary document. Benjamin Parker executed this version of his will approximately 11 months ago. The reading began. Charitable donations. Employee trusts. Community foundations. Long-term business arrangements. Nothing surprising. Uncle Benjamin had always been generous. Yet with every paragraph, I could feel tension growing across the room. Because everyone was waiting for the same thing. The estate itself. Then Catherine paused. Before distribution instructions are reviewed, several supporting legal documents must be acknowledged. Daniel Mercer immediately sat forward. Supporting documents? Yes. She reached into another folder. Documents specifically referenced within Section 4. My father's confidence seemed to return. He folded his arms. Let's proceed. Catherine nodded. Very well. She adjusted her glasses and began reading. The following declarations are included to provide context regarding my relationship with Evelyn Parker and the legal status established between us beginning in the year 2010. My pulse accelerated slightly. 2010, the year I was 13. The year everything changed. Across the table, my mother's posture stiffened. Apparently she recognized the date too. Catherine continued. I wish these documents to be reviewed before any discussion regarding inheritance eligibility occurs. The room became completely silent. Even Daniel Mercer stopped taking notes. Catherine opened a separate file. Document 1 consists of notarized statements and legal correspondence executed in June 2010. She placed several papers on the table. These records concern the voluntary relinquishment of parental responsibilities by Thomas and Linda Parker. My father immediately sat upright. What? My mother looked confused. That can't be right. Catherine remained calm. The documents are properly executed and legally archived. Daniel Mercer extended a hand. May I see those? Catherine passed the copies across the table. The attorney's confidence vanished almost instantly. He flipped through the pages once. Then again. Then a third time. What is this? His voice sounded far less certain now. Catherine answered calmly. A legally notarized agreement signed by Thomas and Linda Parker relinquishing custodial responsibility and parental obligations. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My mother's face turned pale. No. She looked toward my father. Thomas. My father grabbed the documents and began reading. The color drained from his face. Slowly. Completely. Like someone turning off a light. Suddenly, I remembered the morning after Uncle Benjamin rescued me. The mysterious phone call. The lawyer. The paperwork. My stomach tightened. This was it. This was what he had protected. I don't understand, Rachel whispered. Catherine turned another page. The agreement was executed following the permanent transfer of guardianship requested by both parents. Requested by both parents. The words hit the room like an explosion. My father looked horrified. My mother appeared seconds away from tears. Daniel Mercer continued reviewing the documents with increasing concern. These signatures are authentic? Catherine nodded. Verified multiple times. Witnessed? Twice. More silence. Then Mercer asked the question everyone else seemed afraid to ask. Why would parents sign something like this? Nobody answered immediately. Because everyone in the room already knew why. They simply didn't want to say it out loud. Eventually Catherine did it for them. According to the attached statements, the child was considered financially burdensome and no longer welcome in the household. My mother covered her mouth. Rachel looked physically ill. And for the first time since entering the room, I saw genuine fear in my father's eyes. Not sadness. Not regret. Fear. Because suddenly he realized this wasn't going to be the easy inheritance dispute he expected. 15 years earlier, he signed away more than responsibility. He signed away standing. Rights. Claims. Expectations. Everything. Yet according to Catherine's notes, this was only the first document. There were 6 more. And the next one was about to change the entire case. The atmosphere inside the conference room changed completely after the first document was revealed. 15 minutes earlier, my parents had arrived looking confident. Comfortable. Certain they were about to claim part of Uncle Benjamin's estate. Now they sat frozen in their chairs staring at papers they apparently hadn't thought about in over 15 years. Papers that suddenly mattered very much. Catherine Whitmore calmly organized the next set of documents while nobody spoke. Daniel Mercer continued reading the relinquishment agreement with growing concern. The confidence that once filled his posture had disappeared entirely. I need clarification, he finally said. Catherine nodded. Of course. Mercer adjusted his glasses. Are these documents legally enforceable? Yes. Without challenge? They have survived multiple reviews over the years. My father's hands tightened around the edge of the table. This is ridiculous. Catherine looked directly at him. Is the signature yours? Silence. Thomas? He lowered his eyes. Yes. Did you sign voluntarily? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes. My mother suddenly spoke. We were under stress. Her voice trembled. The situation was complicated. Catherine's expression didn't change. The documents contained 6 pages of explanations written by both parents. She opened the file. Would you like me to read portions of them? Linda immediately looked away. Apparently not. For the first time since entering the room, I felt something strange. Not satisfaction. Clarity. Because until that moment, part of me always wondered whether I remembered things too harshly. Whether childhood pain exaggerated reality. Whether perhaps there were details I didn't understand. These documents eliminated all doubt. My parents hadn't acted impulsively. They hadn't made a temporary mistake. They documented their decision carefully. Deliberately. Thoroughly. Then Catherine opened another folder. Document 2. The room immediately became silent again. This record concerns guardianship transfer proceedings initiated in July of 2010. Daniel Mercer sat forward. Despite everything, he clearly hoped this document might help his clients. It didn't. The court approved permanent guardianship placement under Benjamin Parker. Catherine continued reading. The order was supported by written statements from both biological parents indicating they no longer wished to retain responsibility for the child. Rachel quietly whispered something under her breath. It sounded like, "Oh my God." I understood the reaction. Because until then, she probably believed the family version of events. The softened version. The edited version. Not the truth. Mercer flipped through the pages rapidly. Then stopped. Wait. His voice sharpened. What is this notation? Catherine looked down. Which one? Page 11. She smiled slightly. Not a happy smile. A prepared smile. Ah. Suddenly, I knew something important was coming. Catherine turned the page toward everyone. The notation references future adoption eligibility. My father's face went white. Completely white. No. It wasn't a statement. It was fear. Raw fear. Catherine remained calm. Yes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Daniel Mercer slowly looked up from the documents. You're telling me. He stopped. Started again. You're telling me adoption proceedings were anticipated? Correct. My mother looked genuinely panicked now. Benjamin wouldn't do that. Catherine met her eyes. He did. The silence that followed felt endless. 15 years of assumptions were collapsing one piece at a time. Yet according to the stack of folders in front of Catherine, the worst was still coming. Mercer tried one final argument. Even if all of this is accurate, blood relatives still possess certain considerations regarding inheritance. Catherine nodded politely. Ordinarily, yes. Exactly. For a brief moment, hope returned to my parents' faces. Then Catherine added 4 devastating words. Unless superseded by law. Hope disappeared immediately. She opened another folder. Which brings us to document 3. My pulse accelerated. Not because I understood what was happening. Because I could see where it was going. Every piece of paperwork seemed connected to that mysterious morning 15 years ago. Every answer led back to Uncle Benjamin. Every safeguard he quietly created was now revealing itself. Catherine adjusted her glasses. Before we proceed further, I would like to read a statement written personally by Benjamin Parker regarding these records. She unfolded a single sheet of paper. The room became completely silent. I understand some people may someday question why I took these legal steps. The answer is simple. Children deserve certainty. Evelyn deserved certainty. My throat tightened immediately. Catherine continued. She deserved to know she would never again be treated as temporary. Disposable. Conditional. Across the table, my mother started crying quietly. Nobody comforted her. Catherine's voice remained steady. If anyone reviewing these documents believes my actions were excessive, I encourage them to imagine leaving a 13-year-old child on a porch with her belongings packed into garbage bags. The room felt smaller with every sentence. Then imagine asking that child to trust promises. My father lowered his head completely. Rachel stared at the table. Daniel Mercer stopped taking notes. Catherine folded the paper carefully. That concludes the statement. No one spoke. What could they possibly say? Uncle Benjamin wasn't defending himself anymore. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't accusing. He was simply describing reality. And reality sounded devastating when read aloud. Then Catherine looked toward the final stack of documents. The stack everyone seemed afraid of now. "We are ready for Section 7. The words landed like thunder. Because apparently everything so far had only been preparation. Context. Foundation. According to the will, Section 7 contained the actual determination regarding inheritance eligibility. Daniel Mercer swallowed visibly. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. My father looked like a man standing on thin ice while hearing cracks beneath his feet. And for the first time since the meeting began, I realized something extraordinary. My parents hadn't come here expecting a fight. They had come expecting a victory. What they were about to receive instead was a legal confirmation that 15 years earlier, they didn't merely abandon a daughter. They abandoned every future claim to her life. And Section 7 was about to make that fact impossible to deny. The room felt impossibly quiet as Catherine Whitmore opened the folder marked Section 7. Even the rain outside seemed to have stopped. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 15 years of assumptions had already been dismantled piece by piece. Yet judging by the expressions around the table, everyone understood the most important revelation was still ahead. Catherine carefully unfolded another document and placed it in front of her. Section 7 concerns the legal status of Evelyn Parker following the guardianship proceedings established in 2010. Daniel Mercer sat rigidly in his chair. My parents looked exhausted. Rachel appeared overwhelmed. As for me, I felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next had already happened years ago. We were simply catching up to the truth. Catherine adjusted her glasses and began reading. On September 14, 2011, following all required legal procedures and review periods, Evelyn Parker was formally adopted by Benjamin Parker. The words landed like an earthquake. Nobody reacted immediately. It was as though the room needed several seconds to process what had just been said. Then my mother gasped. Loudly. My father went completely still. Daniel Mercer slowly lowered his pen. Rachel covered her mouth. Adopted. The word echoed in my mind. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood. Because Uncle Benjamin and I never discussed adoption. Not directly. Not once. He never sat me down and announced it. Never made a ceremony out of it. Never treated it like a transaction. Looking back, that was exactly who he was. He didn't need paperwork to love me. The paperwork existed to protect me. Catherine continued. The adoption order was finalized by King County Superior Court and remains fully enforceable under Washington law. She passed copies around the table. Daniel Mercer reviewed the pages with the expression of a man watching his case disappear in real time. This changes everything, he muttered. Catherine nodded. Correct. My father finally found his voice. No. The word sounded desperate. Benjamin never told us. Catherine looked directly at him. That would have been difficult. Why? Her answer was devastatingly simple. Because according to the documents you signed, you requested no future involvement. Silence. Absolute silence. My mother started crying again. This time harder. Not polite tears. Real tears. Yet even then, I couldn't tell whether she was grieving the loss of a daughter or the consequences of her choices. Maybe both. Daniel Mercer cleared his throat. To be absolutely clear. He looked toward Catherine. Under the law, Evelyn Parker ceased being their legal child? Catherine nodded. 15 years ago. And became Benjamin Parker's legal daughter? Correct. Another long silence followed. Then Catherine opened the final section of the will. The actual inheritance instructions. The moment everyone had been waiting for. I leave ownership of Parker Development Holdings, all associated real estate assets, investment portfolios, trust accounts, and controlling interests to my daughter, Evelyn Parker. Daughter. Not niece. Daughter. My throat tightened immediately. Catherine continued reading. This decision reflects not only her professional qualifications but also the reality that she has been my family in every meaningful sense of the word. Across the table, my father closed his eyes. My mother stared blankly at the documents. Rachel quietly cried. There would be no inheritance dispute. No legal battle. No negotiation. The estate belonged entirely to me. Not because of luck. Not because of favoritism. Because Uncle Benjamin deliberately built safeguards over 15 years to ensure exactly this outcome. Then Catherine surprised everyone again. There is one final item. She reached into a separate envelope. A personal letter. My pulse accelerated. A letter? Catherine nodded. Benjamin instructed that it be read aloud only after all legal determinations were complete. The room became silent once more. Catherine unfolded the pages and began reading. If you are hearing this, then I am probably being discussed in a conference room full of lawyers. The thought alone is exhausting. Unexpected laughter broke through the tension. Even I smiled. That sounded exactly like him. Catherine continued. First, Evelyn, if you're listening, I need you to know something. You were never the child nobody wanted. You were the child somebody failed to deserve. Tears immediately filled my eyes. The greatest privilege of my life was becoming your father. Not legally. Not financially. Personally. My vision blurred. Across the table, my mother cried openly now. Yet Catherine kept reading. People often assume family is created by blood. I disagree. Family is created by responsibility. By presence. By showing up. Day after day. Year after year. Every sentence felt like a quiet truth finally spoken aloud. If anyone in this room believes they deserve something because of biology alone, I encourage them to remember who packed a child's belongings into garbage bags and who drove through the night to bring her home. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to argue. Everything I leave behind belongs to Evelyn because she earned my trust. She earned my respect. Most importantly, she earned my love. Catherine folded the letter slowly. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then my mother spoke. Her voice barely worked. Please. Everyone looked at her. She stared directly at me. Evelyn, please. Tears streamed down her face. We made mistakes. Mistakes. Such a small word for 15 years. We were wrong. Her voice cracked. Terribly wrong. My father looked broken. Rachel couldn't stop crying. Yet for the first time since entering that room, nobody was talking about money anymore. Nobody was talking about inheritance. They were talking about loss. Real loss. The kind that accumulates over years until it becomes impossible to ignore. My mother reached across the table slightly. Please give us a chance. The request hung in the air. Fragile. Desperate. 15 years ago, they left a 13-year-old girl sitting on a porch beside 4 garbage bags. Now, for the first time, they finally understood what it felt like to stand on the other side of a closed door. And the decision about whether that door would ever open again now belonged entirely to me. For several seconds after my mother spoke, nobody in the room moved. The silence felt different now. Not tense. Not hostile. Just honest. For the first time in 15 years, nobody was pretending. No one was rewriting history. No one was searching for excuses. The truth sat openly on the conference table between us. Signed. Notarized. Filed. Preserved. Impossible to argue with. My mother looked older than I remembered. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the weight of every decision she spent years avoiding had finally arrived all at once. Please give us a chance. Her voice trembled again. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. A chance to do what? She opened her mouth. Then stopped. Because that was the problem. There wasn't an obvious answer. We couldn't recover birthdays. We couldn't recover graduations. We couldn't recover Christmas mornings, school plays, acceptance letters, and ordinary afternoons that never happened. Some things disappear permanently. My father finally spoke. We know we can't fix it. His voice sounded exhausted. Then what exactly are you asking for? I asked. Another silence followed. Rachel surprised everyone by answering first. Maybe we're asking for a future. Every head turned toward her. Tears still filled her eyes. Not the past. She swallowed hard. Just whatever comes next. The honesty caught me off guard. Because unlike my parents, Rachel wasn't trying to defend herself. She wasn't negotiating. She wasn't asking for money. She simply looked sad. Deeply sad. Catherine Whitmore quietly gathered documents while allowing the conversation to continue. Daniel Mercer remained completely silent. His case had effectively disappeared hours earlier. There was nothing left to argue. No loophole. No technicality. No inheritance claim. The law was clear. The documents were clear. Uncle Benjamin had anticipated every possible challenge. Eventually, the meeting ended. My parents stood slowly. Neither seemed eager to leave. Yet neither knew what else to say. Before walking out, my father stopped near the door. Benjamin was a better parent than we were. The admission hung in the air. Simple. Painful. True. Then they left. Rachel followed several steps behind. Just before reaching the hallway, she turned back. I'm sorry. Unlike the others, she didn't ask for anything afterward. She simply left. The following weeks were strangely quiet. Legal matters concluded quickly. Ownership transfers were finalized. Trust structures activated. Business operations continued. Life moved forward. Yet emotionally, I felt suspended between two worlds. One chapter had ended. Another hadn't fully begun. During that period, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Amanda Foster. Not because I was falling apart. Because I wanted to understand why the meeting affected me so deeply. One afternoon, she asked a question that stayed with me. What do you think forgiveness means? I considered it carefully. Letting someone back into your life? She shook her head. That's reconciliation. I frowned. What's the difference? Dr. Foster smiled gently. Forgiveness is releasing the burden. Reconciliation is rebuilding trust. That distinction changed everything. Because for years, I believed those concepts were identical. If you forgave someone, you had to welcome them back completely. If you set boundaries, you weren't truly forgiving. Suddenly, I realized neither assumption was true. I could release the anger without erasing the consequences. A month later, my mother sent an email. Then another. Then several more. None mentioned money. None mentioned inheritance. Most were surprisingly ordinary. Small memories. Old photographs. Stories about family members. Attempts to reconnect. My father occasionally wrote too. Short messages. Honest ones. No demands. No pressure. Just effort. For the first time in my life, effort. I didn't respond immediately. Sometimes not at all. But eventually, I replied to a few. Slowly. Carefully. On my terms. Rachel's messages were different. Less formal. More vulnerable. She admitted things I never expected to hear. How guilty she felt. How much she noticed but never challenged. How often she benefited from favoritism while pretending not to see it. None of it erased the past. But honesty has value. Even delayed honesty. About 6 months after the will reading, another surprise arrived. Daniel Mercer, my parents' attorney, became the subject of an ethics investigation. Apparently he had encouraged several inheritance claims despite clear documentation contradicting them. The details didn't matter much to me. What mattered was something else. For the first time, I wasn't interested in revenge. Years earlier, I would have celebrated. Now I mostly felt indifferent. Healing does that. It makes some victories feel unnecessary. Meanwhile, Uncle Benjamin's legacy continued growing. Not just through the company. Through people. Through impact. Through values. One evening, while reviewing scholarship proposals for a charitable foundation, I had an idea. 3 months later, the Benjamin Parker STEM Scholarship officially launched. Full scholarships for students facing family hardship. Students who needed opportunities. Students who needed someone to believe in them. The first year alone, 12 students received support. Watching those acceptance letters go out became one of the proudest moments of my life. Because somewhere out there, another 13-year-old kid might be opening an envelope and realizing their future matters. Just like I once did. Nearly a year after the will reading, Rachel visited Seattle. We met for coffee. Nothing dramatic happened. No emotional speeches. No miraculous reunion. Just 2 adults talking honestly for the first time. Before leaving, she looked at me and smiled sadly. He really was your dad, wasn't he? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Rachel nodded. I think he was the best thing that ever happened to both of us. Looking back now, people always focus on the inheritance. The estate. The legal documents. The courtroom-style confrontation. But that was never the real story. The real story began on a porch when a 13-year-old girl discovered her belongings packed into garbage bags. And it ended with that same girl realizing something important. The people who abandon you do not get to define you. They do not decide your value. They do not control your future. My parents abandoned me at 13, unaware that 15 years later they would be standing in front of me asking for another chance. The irony is that by then, I no longer needed anything from them. Not approval. Not validation. Not apologies. Uncle Benjamin gave me something far more valuable. A home. A future. A family. And because of that, when my parents finally knocked on the door they once closed behind me, I was able to answer not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Not with revenge, but with clarity. Not with hatred, but with self-respect. Because the greatest inheritance Uncle Benjamin left me was never money. It was the certainty that I was always worthy of being loved. The only people who failed to see it were the ones who walked away.